Hey everybody, it's Seth and Paul for the Everything Money channel. Today we talk about Joel Greenblatt's book, The Little Book That Beats the Market, Paul.
Yeah, something like that.
I have implemented this investing strategery into my portfolio, and Paul tells me if I'm stupid or smart. I think we know where we're going with this, but since you... Anyway, join us on the Everything Money channel where we talk about this book and we talk about investing and growing your wealth. Thanks, Paul. Right now, baby, join us. Paul, you handed me this book a couple weeks ago. In fact, you prefaced it with, if I buy you this book, will you promise me you read it?
I did.
Why did you do that?
So this is, Joel Greenblatt is a billionaire hedge fund guy. What he has done, so by the way, what are we going to do here?
We're going to give a moment of likeness. Press that like button right now. It takes 2 seconds. It really helps us. Go ahead, Paul.
We need to get a lot of likes on these things so I can pay Don and Seth more. So Joel Greenblatt is, I'm going to go through a lot of criticism of backtesting and things like that, and why I don't really buy into the criticism. So Joel Greenblatt is a hedge fund manager, and he went back in history from like 1988 to 2011 and looked at companies that had a low earnings yield, which is basically price to earnings ratio, essentially, to make it easy, and a high return on assets. He ranked them all the ones in the Russell 3000. Russell 3000 is the 3,000 biggest. It's basically considered the market, I guess. Wilshire 5. Either way, ranks them all 1 to 3,000 in terms of lowest PE and highest return on assets. And I think he got rid of everything below 5 PE.
Talk about PE one more time.
Price to earnings ratio. The price of the company divided by the earnings of the company, or the price of the stock divided by the earnings per share of the stock.
So low PE is good.
I mean, low PE can be good. You want to pay a lower multiple for earnings. But a low PE could happen because a company's in trouble. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So he then ranks them, adds the ranks together, and those combined ranks he then ranks. And he says you should buy the 30 or 50 lowest ranked lowest sum ranked. And he says if you do this, you're going to make like 22% returns and things like that. It's in a book called The Little Book That Beats the Market or something like that.
Yes, and there was a revised version that came out 10 years later.
Yes.
The Little Book that still beats the market.
Correct. So everybody's like, wow, this thing crushes. What's the catch? Mm-hmm. So the catch is that these kind of companies that have low PEs and high return on assets aren't sexy all the time.
Yeah, if you look at the list,
if you go to
magicformulainvesting.com.
Yeah, magicformulainvesting.com.
Probably out of the top 30, you may have heard of 2 of them.
Yes.
HP and Xerox, maybe.
Yeah.
The rest of them, you're like, who the hell is...
I think Hanes Brand's in there.
One of them is Prestige Worldwide. But the premise is you are to blindly buy these equal shares of these stocks.
Yep, whether 30 or 50, and you pick the market cap you want to start at.
You advise $500 million.
Yeah, I just sat there and said, like, to me, I'd rather
I did $250.
Okay, whatever you did. So Seth did this.
Oh, that's the premise of the show.
Yeah.
I had been sitting on cash for a long time. I sold basically a majority of my investments in stocks last fall in October because dear friends of ours were saying, no virus or no virus, they were seeing an economic crash around February 2020. And oddly enough, it basically happened right around then in March. And so I instituted this July 1st. I went all in, Paul.
I was very surprised. And I have my hesitations with you because I know you have been a lot better about going like, okay, like Tesla's up a lot. And I see you just going, Tesla's up a lot. The reason this is very difficult is because it underperforms the market for several years in a row at times. Mm-hmm. And those are usually the times when everybody's making a lot of money in these hype stocks. Mm-hmm. So it takes a discipline of being able to sit there and say, no, I'm okay not beating the market for a few years. Because in the bad years, when the market's down a lot, you will potentially be up or you will have crushed the market.
So going back to the book, the reason we talk about this is you handed me this book. Why was it so important for you to give me this book?
You know, I didn't expect you to actually go invest the way it says, but it was just this guy sitting there saying basically all the things I say, which is it takes discipline. You have to be okay being wrong for a while. And these are the things that really matter in buying stocks. And that's paying a low multiple of earnings, and a high return on assets.
Yeah, I read the book, which is a very short and easy read. It still took me 3 weeks, but I was reading it prior to bed. Paul, I don't read it all. So, reading any book was, I read tons of internet articles and whatnot.
Listen, I don't think
Penthouse Forum.
I don't think, okay, but go ahead.
So I did read the book, and for me, it was just so clearly the point of the book is he's speaking to younger people.
Yes.
About investing.
Yes.
And so I've transferred sort of what he's saying to my kids, my 10-year-old, of course. But it just seemed to make so much sense. And
we all like picking individual stocks, and this takes that away.
Yeah, it does.
It's a system. Now, people would sit there. I've had people criticize backtesting all the time. Oh, backtesting doesn't work. You're searching for patterns. No, that's not what proper backtesting is. If you sit there and say every other Monday of the month, if you buy, yes, that is looking for a pattern.
Yeah.
But if you pick fundamental reasons why companies should do well, your investment should do well, it makes logical sense that if you pay a low multiple of earnings, and if you pick companies that do a good job of getting a high return on the assets in the company, they're probably going to be the ones that do the best. It's a logical thing. Yeah, so
you're supposed to blindly invest in 30 to 50 of these companies. I did 30, and you give it 1 year. And if the list, you reevaluate your stocks in 1 year. If certain stocks are still on the list, you keep them. If not, you sell out.
You get the list again in a year, and sell the ones that were not on the list anymore, and buy the new ones.
And there's another gal on YouTube doing this. And unfortunately, she started this right before the crash, so her numbers are very, very down at the moment. But she's sticking to it, and I've never felt so at ease sticking to something.
Wow. Listen, I'm preparing you though. You're gonna have to remember that there will be tough times, and that's the discipline that I have. Going, nope, I believe in this. Like I do believe in buying. I have similar methods that I use to screen for stocks and then pare down from there. I use the same sort of, and that's what he does. Joel Greenblatt says, listen, I use this list myself, but I don't buy the whole list. I use it and go pick and choose from the list of what I'm going to buy. It's the same thing I kind of do. But if you're disciplined and you're willing to wait out years and years and years of being wrong, and your friends all making 30% while you're making 12%, I'm pretty confident that in the years that they do very poorly, you will do much better. And over a long period of time, you will beat the market. That is the idea behind it.
Yeah.
And it is proven to work over 20 plus year periods of time. Is that enough time? Even if I didn't realize how hard it is to be disciplined enough to not deviate from this method, even if you're not being the market, I wouldn't believe it. But I've seen human behavior, and I've seen how hard it is for people to go, wait, my buddy bought Tesla for $400, now it's $1,400, and I made 1.5% that same amount of time. That sucks.
Mm-hmm.
Because all you see is they made that. You don't see the other losses they had. You don't see the other catastrophes they had. You're not going to hear from them when Tesla goes down to 200 or whatever it does. They're going to be off the face of this earth, like not even talking about investments anymore. That's the benefit I have from looking at this method. And hopefully, since you're around me all the time, you'll be able to learn that.
I feel for our viewers because I call you all the time and say how much you've sort of influenced my life, my decision-making, my patience in terms of investing, knowing how long my life is. I got in this funk where I hit 39 and started saying how old I was, and you keep telling me how young I am. But I guess the point is, it's nice to surround myself with people who have shown obvious success, and I can sort of model my behavior after that.
And by the way, I didn't tell you to put all your money in it either.
That's okay.
You did that, though.
I did. No, not all. Not
oh,
all.
You didn't?
No, not all.
Oh, okay.
No, I had about 250,000, and I put 150 in.
Oh, okay. Well, you didn't put all of it. Good.
Yeah. But regardless, I was thinking to myself, the viewers might not have someone like yourself in their lives, but they can with YouTube.
Yes, they can.
You can comment below. You can ask Paul. If someone DM'd us, Paul, and asked us questions, what would you would probably talk to people.
I always respond.
Yeah.
I actually love responding when I get it. I love responding. When people write messages, I have my Y2 Studio app that Don set me up with. And when the comments come in, I go in there and I'm trying to answer and put PG at the end. That way people know it's me versus Don. Like if you say, hey, great video, Don will probably thank you. If you write, hey, Paul, I'm looking at blah, 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 blah. Is this the right thought process? I will respond personally.
Do you and or Joel Greenblatt actually think that normal people are just going to pick this book up and take right to the formula? Because what does it take?
No, it's hard.
Right?
It takes discipline.
Yeah, I mean, like...
Discipline's the hardest thing in the world. It like literally investing isn't about anything other than discipline. I've learned that over the last 20 years. It's not about the numbers, it's about the discipline. It is about being the market is not difficult if you take the discipline out. But it's the discipline of sitting there going like, okay, am I right on this? It's very, very difficult to do that. His system is a system. You just follow it blindly.
Yeah.
The thing that sucks is you did a good job holding that yawn in, by the way.
Yeah, I'm a professional non-yawner.
It's a system that it's not sexy to not pick stocks. And I told you, no, still pick stocks, but keep 5% of your portfolio for picking individual stocks. Have fun with that. Mm-hmm. Me, I still pick my stocks. I still love looking at my stocks. I love doing all that stuff. But I have an analysis that I can do that allows me to pick stocks and have fun with it and pick a portfolio of them and say, oh, some of them are going to do what I want them to do, some of them aren't. And that's that.
Yeah, for me, it was just relieving not have to pick them anymore.
Yeah, it's a very relieving thing, especially with your previous method of picking them was...
What was hot?
What was
sounded
hot?
Good?
Yeah, hot or not.
What was flashy?
Yeah, so...
Tesla and Amazon?
Everybody criticizes backtesting. I think they're wrong. Unless, the joke is... The one I always talked about was if the NSC wins the Super Bowl, the reigning president wins there, or some shit like that. I'm like, listen, those aren't backtest. Those have nothing to do with each other. There's no correlation, zero correlation. But when it comes to investing, the lower price you pay, the better you will do. So you look at those multiples that you can pay and get lower values of, you'll probably do better over the long haul. If you pick a big enough portfolio. So there's multiple theories behind this. Some investors, like Warren Buffett, originally was an investor where he wanted to make very concentrated bets. I'm going to bet 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 companies. Ben Graham, his mentor, was the person who said, listen, I'm going to pick these companies. I'm going to pick 30 of them because I'm probably going to be wrong on some of them. I want to make sure that I pick 30 that have a general idea. And that's kind of where I am. I believe in picking 30, 40 companies that I believe hit my threshold, but I don't need to go sit there and interview company executives to understand how they really think. And if the company boss is, banging a secretary and charging it all to I don't care about that. I care about the financials, and I want to look at the financials that over time will do better.
What are you talking about, banging a secretary?
I just make it's funny, like, my guy, Gary, he's out there interviewing customers, interviewing companies, and talking to, and I'm going no, I don't want to do that.
That's pretty in depth.
Yeah, and to me, I don't think that work for him is worth it for me. I figure out other ways to use my talents to go make more money.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's the way I look at it, and I think this little book that beats the market. I'm sure right now it hasn't been doing well. I'm sure if there's an analysis done over the last 10 years, it probably hasn't done very well because it's all been hype stocks lately. Mm-hmm. And these companies are not hype stocks. Borg Warner. What does Borg Warner do?
What?
Exactly. I think that's one of the stocks you own.
Oh, boy. Yikes. What is it called?
BWA is a ticker. I don't know.
No, I don't think it's on the list.
I could have sworn it was
on the list.
It
doesn't sound familiar.
Because I kept finding that stock, and then when you showed me the list one day, I'm like, oh, there's Borg Warner. I kept popping up.
What is it?
They do auto manufacturing for like different parts of the car or something.
Wow.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yes, I went from like over being involved with my stocks and panicking about every day to...
It's like a mutual fund. You're basically buying a mutual fund.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to look at it.
Right? That's all you're doing is buying a mutual fund.
Yeah, Beth was very...
Humans ruin investing.
My wife was very... When I told her what I had done under this guidance, she was very fearful and worried.
But buying Tesla stock wasn't fearful or worrisome.
No, it's not.
That's so funny to me.
Yeah, I said, Beth, we could go back to just willy-nilly picking...
Wow, look at you, big shot.
Picking stocks. This is coming from a guy who owned a shit ton of Amazon and Tesla.
And Bitcoin.
Yeah, Bitcoin. Not a shit ton. But Amazon and Tesla was both over 75 or 80 shares of each.
Yeah, you had 40, 50% of your portfolio in those two stocks.
And boy, what my portfolio would be today.
I know. Sorry.
It's okay.
I owe you one. Humans ruin investing. Human thinking ruin investing. Human emotion, I should say, ruins investing. That's that. People say like, oh, so if I show them a back test that works, like, oh, I'd do that. It crushes the market. Okay, what about this 5-year period when it didn't beat the market? Yeah, I'd be fine because you're looking at it from the 2020 hindsight view.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of it, you better believe I will probably go, okay, well, it's not beating right now. I don't care. I look at it in the last 4 years, I've not made much money in stocks, so I don't care.
Well, I feel at ease knowing that if it's not beating the market, I should be okay because it's still, the premise still seems so viable.
And you read the book, and he was very logical.
He spends the whole book, he basically just defends the process.
Yeah.
He keeps coming up with reasons why the process shouldn't work and why it still does.
Yep.
And it just makes sense, right?
There's a big book I got recently that goes through all these similar kind of tests, back tests. I forget the name of the book, but either way, it's a big book. And it's interesting because the back testing that people criticize, their comment is, listen, if the back testing was random and it didn't work, let's look at if we bought these companies with these metrics, let's look at the 10% best ones and go all the way down the list, 10%, 20%, 30%. And sure enough, literally in order, it goes from best performance to worst performance. So it's like 13% a year, 12.7, 11.8. I mean, just right down the list. And you sit there and go, how is it possible that doesn't work then? Yeah. It's literally making logical sense. Like, oh, if you buy more expensive ones as you go down the list, it will work less. And guess what? It works less as well. That's not even correct, what I just said. Less as well?
It works less as well. That is a weird way to say it.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense. I just made up something there. The whole point I'm trying to make is discipline's the hard part.
Yeah.
It's so funny. People will criticize like value investing discipline. Value investing like metrics, but then they'll believe somebody who sits there and goes, well, Tesla's a cool company, so therefore I'm going to buy. That's their logic. Like, oh, it's changing the car game, which is not. But they basically sit there and say it doesn't matter what the price of Tesla is, you should buy it. When your reason for buying something has nothing to do with some sort of valuation, you are essentially saying any price is okay for me. You might sit there and say, no, that's not true. That's what I'm saying. Yes, that's what you're saying. So you're telling me at this price today that you're buying it at, it just happened to be the right price for it? No. At least with value investing, I go, hey, I think the value is around $70 a share. Well, it's at $140 right now. Okay, so I'm not a buyer.
Mm-hmm.
It's at $30 right now. Okay, I'm a buyer.
Yeah.
Great. These are the things, and people, you don't realize that when you're buying Tesla at this price, you're basically saying you're willing to buy it at any price. And every single person who buys Tesla says, well, no, I wouldn't pay $3,000 for it. Well, I bet you at $300 a share, you said you wouldn't have paid $1,400 a share for it, and you are today.
Yeah.
So let's not talk about that.
We will certainly update you in a year from now.
And see how it goes. That's a good idea, actually.
Yeah.
I want to start doing that, by the way.
Go on.
I want to start reporting my returns every year.
Oh. Wow.
Yeah. I want to start showing my returns every year.
That's interesting.
Pre-tax.
Okay.
So we're going to start January 1 of 2021.
That's good years, Paul. Good counting.
I'm not exaggerating when I say, like, is it 2020?
Yeah.
So I spent a decade there. What?
What are you saying? I don't even know what you're saying right now. Oh, there's your jokes are coming across today.
There's a Seinfeld episode where Kramer has the Merv Griffin set.
Oh, yeah, I love that one.
Can you stop the crickets?
I'm going to keep going just as you talk now because you're making so little sense.
They talk about Albuquerque, and Kramer says, I spent a month there one night. And they're like, do this like there's no camera. This is funny. Anyhow, I want to start reporting my returns because I'm confident to sit there and say, like, I think over 10 plus year periods of time, I will do quite well in the market.
If you're out there and you are coming off a property, your dad is coming off a property, you better call Paul. He's got money to burn. Well, not burn, but he's got money to invest.
If I had money to burn, I'd buy Tesla. Zing.
Zinga. Thanks for joining us today on the Everything Money channel.
Like those videos.
Press the like button, subscribe. Paul, thank you.
Peace.
See you.